Imagine you are standing at the zoo, looking at a massive 6-ton African elephant. Now, imagine the zoo gates open, the elephant charges out, and your only job is to kill it. You cannot use a gun, you cannot use a car. You are wearing a piece of animal skin, and you are holding a wooden stick with a sharp rock tied to the end of it. If you had to face that animal right now, you would be crushed into a literal red paste in about 4 seconds. Now, rewind the clock 15,000 years to the Ice Age. The world was dominated by megafauna. These were real-life monsters. There were woolly mammoths that weighed up to 10 tons. There were giant ground sloths the size of modern minivans, with claws like scythes. There were dire wolves, saber-toothed cats, and short-faced bears that stood 12 feet tall on their hind legs. And then, there was us, Homo sapiens. Biologically speaking, humans are an absolute joke. We have no claws, we have no venom. Our teeth are flat and useless for fighting. We have no thick armor or fur to protect us. We are slow, squishy, and incredibly weak compared to almost every other predator on Earth. By all laws of nature, we should have been a minor snack for the giants of the Ice Age. But if you look at the fossil record, a terrifying pattern emerges. Everywhere humans migrated, whether it was Europe, the Americas, or Australia, the massive giants almost immediately went extinct. We didn't just survive the monsters, we hunted them to the brink of extinction. But how? How did a hairless, 5'5" ape kill a 10,000-pound woolly mammoth? If you watch movies, you probably think a large group of cavemen just surrounded a mammoth and poked it with spears until it died. But ancient humans were vastly smarter than that. Running up to a terrified, thrashing mammoth with a short spear is a guaranteed death sentence. A mammoth could snap a human spine with a casual flick of its trunk. Ancient humans didn't win through brute strength. They won through unparalleled, terrifying intelligence. They weaponized physics, chemistry, geography, and their own biology to become the most lethal predators this planet has ever seen. Let's start with their first genius tactic: weaponized geography. Ancient humans were master surveyors. When they wanted to hunt a herd of giants, they didn't just chase them across an open field. They spent days scouting the local terrain, looking for natural bottlenecks, steep cliffs, or narrow ravines. Once they found the perfect kill zone, the trap was set. A group of humans would use fire and loud noises to panic a mammoth herd, driving them away from safety and steering them directly into a narrow, dead-end canyon. The mammoths, weighing several tons, couldn't easily turn around in the tight space. Waiting at the top of the canyon cliffs was the rest of the human tribe. But they weren't holding spears, they were holding levers. Ancient humans understood gravity. They had pre-positioned massive, heavy boulders right on the edge of the cliff. As the mammoth herd was funneled into the narrow canyon below, the humans at the top would use thick wooden logs as levers to push the massive boulders off the edge. The rocks would drop like meteorites, instantly crushing the spines and skulls of the mammoths below. The hunters didn't have to risk a single scratch. They let gravity do 100% of the killing. But cliffs weren't the only environmental traps. Ancient humans also figured out how to weaponize the giants' biggest advantage against them: their massive weight. If a 10-ton mastodon charges at a 150-pound human on solid ground, the human dies. But what happens if that ground is a partially frozen lake or a deep, sticky peat bog? Ancient hunters would intentionally provoke herds of megafauna and kite them toward unstable terrain. Because humans are incredibly light and walk upright on 2 flat feet, we could easily run across deep mud, snow, or thin ice without sinking. But a massive woolly rhino? The second it stepped into the swamp, its massive, pillar-like legs would punch straight through the crust. The heavier they were, the faster they sank. They became hopelessly trapped in the freezing mud, exhausting themselves as they thrashed around. The hunters would then casually walk across the surface of the mud, completely safe, and dispatch the paralyzed giant. It was prehistoric quicksand warfare. But what if you didn't have a cliff and you didn't have a swamp? What if you were tracking an animal on the flat, endless plains of ancient Africa? If you can't trap them, you have to run them down. At first glance, humans are terrible runners. A cheetah can sprint 70 miles per hour. A lion can run 50 miles per hour. Even a grizzly bear can hit 35 miles per hour. The fastest human on Earth maxes out at about 27 miles per hour for a few seconds. But ancient humans had a biological cheat code that no other animal on Earth possessed. We sweat. Almost all other mammals are covered in fur, and they cool down by panting. If a cheetah runs at top speed, its internal body temperature skyrockets. Within 30 to 60 seconds, it absolutely has to stop, or its brain will literally cook inside its own skull. Animals are sprinters. They have no stamina. Humans, on the other hand, have 3 million sweat glands covering our hairless bodies. When we run, The wind hits the water on our skin, creating an evaporative cooling system that acts like a biological air conditioner. We also walk upright on two legs, which minimizes the amount of skin exposed to the beating sun, and frees up our chest cavity so we can take deep, rhythmic breaths while in motion. This allowed ancient humans to invent a terrifying tactic called persistence hunting. Our ancestors essentially turned into the Terminator. A group of hunters would spot a massive beast and start jogging after it. The animal would panic and sprint away at top speed. It would get a mile ahead, find a shady tree, and lie down to desperately pant and cool off. But 10 minutes later, the humans would jog over the hill, unstoppable, relentless. The animal would have to stand up and sprint away again before it had time to cool down. The humans would just keep jogging at a steady, terrifyingly slow pace. They would track its footprints. They would follow it for 5, 10, sometimes 20 miles under the blazing sun. Eventually, the massive animal's biology would fail. Its core temperature would spike. It would collapse into the dirt, entirely paralyzed by heat stroke, literally cooking from the inside out. The human hunters would casually walk up to the paralyzed giant and end its life. If you have ever gone for a long run and experienced a runner's high, that sudden rush of euphoria and energy that hits you when you feel like quitting, that is not a modern fitness quirk. That is an ancient dose of evolutionary dopamine, designed strictly to keep you jogging after a dying animal so your tribe wouldn't starve. But what if you didn't want to run for 20 miles? What if you wanted to kill a massive beast with just a single, tiny scratch? Long before modern science, ancient humans invented chemical warfare. Our ancestors realized that certain frogs, snakes, and plants contained deadly neurotoxins. A normal predator just avoids poisonous things. But human brains look at poison and think, how can I use this to kill someone else? Hunters would harvest the toxic sap from specific trees, or extract the venom from insects and amphibians. They would carefully boil it down into a thick, lethal paste and coat the tips of their wooden spears and bone arrows. Suddenly, they didn't need to pierce a mammoth's heart to kill it. They just needed to break the skin. Once the poison tip scratched the animal, the neurotoxin would enter the bloodstream, paralyzing the giant's respiratory system. Within minutes, a 10,000-pound monster would collapse, entirely defeated by a few drops of plant juice. It was a biological hack that allowed humans to punch infinitely above their weight class. But sometimes, hunters had to face an aggressive beast head-on in an open space, without poison. To do this, ancient humans needed a projectile weapon, but throwing a wooden spear with your bare arm isn't going to do much against a giant ground sloth. These animals had hides that were inches thick, covered in dense, matted fur, protecting a massive ribcage. A human arm simply cannot generate enough force to pierce that armor. So, our ancestors invented a brand new body part. Around 30,000 years ago, ancient humans invented a device called the atlatl, or the spear thrower. It was a simple, hooked piece of wood, maybe 2 feet long. You would hook the back of your spear into the end of the atlatl, hold the handle, and throw. But this simple piece of wood changed the world. It acted as an artificial extension of the human arm, adding an extra joint to the wrist. It allowed hunters to harness the physics of leverage and kinetic energy. When an ancient human threw a spear using an atlatl, the wooden shaft would bend and whip forward, launching the projectile at over 90 miles per hour. It hit with over 200 times the force of a hand-thrown spear. It was prehistoric artillery. Suddenly, humans didn't have to get within striking distance of a giant's tusks or claws. A line of hunters could stand 100 feet away and launch a volley of armor-piercing projectiles with the stopping power of a modern .357 Magnum handgun. It shattered mammoth ribs and pierced vital organs from a perfectly safe distance. The mechanics required to throw an object that fast and that accurately require incredible neurological wiring. You have to perfectly coordinate your hips, your shoulders, your elbow, and the release of your wrist in a split second. Humans are the only species on Earth capable of doing this. Today, when you watch a baseball pitcher throw a 95-mile-per-hour fastball, or a quarterback launch a perfect 50-yard pass, you are watching the exact same neurological hardware that our ancestors used to shatter the skulls of giant predators. We took our most lethal survival skill and turned it into sports. So, how did a weak, hairless ape conquer a world filled with giants? We didn't do it by growing larger muscles or sharper teeth. We did it by expanding our brains. Ancient humans were the ultimate apex predators because they didn't play by the rules of nature. While the giants relied on brute force, humans used the environment as a weapon. While other predators relied on short sprints, humans weaponized their sweat to run monsters to death. They used chemical warfare to paralyze their prey, and physics hacking tools to kill from a distance. The giants never stood a chance. So the next time you feel small or physically weak, Remember your ancestry. You are the direct descendant of prehistoric geniuses who looked at a 10,000-pound armored monster, and instead of running away, they did the math, picked up a rock, and conquered the planet.